Good evening and welcome back to another edition of the Green and White podcast brought to you by Argyle Life, and we are back with back-to-back away wins in the league, now matching our tally of away wins to home wins this season in the league. Who'd have thought that that would be the case as we round off September with a fourth win of the season and a comfortable 4-0 win over Burton Albion. As you can see, I have a plethora of knowledge who are going to talk through the 4-0 victory yesterday in Burton upon Trent. Dan, John, Sam, regular faces to the pod, join me, and delighted to say Gab Sutton, who was at the game yesterday, is also going to give his neutral, but of course biased in Argyle's favour view on the performance. But before we do, got to get the usual things in: like, comment, subscribe. All the links are below. Also, do get your questions in for tonight's show. We got Gab for around 45 minutes or so to start off the programme as we talk about Burton. And then at some point, we've got yet another previous manager returning to Devon next weekend that we need to talk about. If you see me looking stage left, I am keeping track of the USA annihilation over the other side of the pond in the Gulf. So I will be listening to the lads, but I will mostly be watching my TV to the left. And of course, it would be totally remiss of me to say, as you can see on your screen, there is just a little tiny QR code that it would mean a huge amount to all of us if you can scan that and vote for Argyle Life and the Green and White podcast in the 2025 Football Content Awards. We are up for a much more realistic title this year of Best Club Content Creator within the Football League. Simply scan that QR code, give us a little vote. It would mean a huge amount, because we went all the way to Tottenham last year, had a really good night. Sam Down came home trophyless, but this year he wants to go to Ellen Road and bring home a trophy. But for now, Sam Down, why don't you give us a whistle-stop tour of Burton Albion 0, Plymouth Argyle 4?
Oh, it's fantastic to come out of a game and still be here on the Sunday with a big, wide smile on my face after a demolition job of Burton. I think Joe said it was a demolition in the Ryder Cup. We had a demolition in Burton yesterday as well. Yeah, I'm so happy with everything about that game. That's really, really made me a lot more confident in many ways. Going on to the kind of run through, I'm sure Joe will ask some of those questions in a minute about my thoughts on our season and our position in general. Going on to the match run through, bizarrely one of the only games that we actually didn't start brightly under Tom Cleverley. First 5-10 minutes, I think Burton had the better of the game. They had a little bit of a goalmouth scramble very early on, which I'm not quite sure how it stayed out, but thank goodness it did, because it could have been a different game otherwise. But once we got that little 10-15 at most minute spell out of our system, we gradually began to really control the midfield, control the game, and it kind of felt like a matter of time before we broke the deadlock. And when we eventually did, so obviously there was a great cross from Bradley Ibrahim. Malachi Boateng got his head onto it, and it was a really excellent save, one of the best saves from the opposing keeper I've seen in quite some time, to stop Boateng heading us into the lead. And then the
probably since last weekend, in fact.
I think that one was better. I do. I think the one yesterday was even better, because it was it's such an incredibly quick reaction. Incredibly quick reaction. Obviously, then we did go 1-0 up. Lovely ball from Mumba down into the channels. Boateng cuts it across again. Very, very well executed cross from Boateng, and Tolai slides it in to make it 1-0. Second goal came from an avenue that we've obviously not really had too much success with in recent weeks and months, despite a lot of trying, which was a long throw. Wiradu puts it into a very dangerous area. Boateng, again, the assister for the second goal in a row, gets his head on it. And it's obviously in that instance, Aseni who taps it home. Very much in control. It came out of the second half very, very brightly. And it was, I think Wigan again for the third goal was involved with a lofting long ball over the top. And I think somebody battles for it, doesn't quite get it. And it goes back to Ibrahim. I think it's Senny who battles for it and doesn't quite get to it. Goes back to Ibrahim, who slots through to lie one-on-one. And then from a tough, one-on-one, but not an easy finish, a bit of a tough angle, and finds the net with aplomb, 3-0. And at that point, it wasn't quite game over, but the fat lady was certainly warming up. Had a fair few chances, again, half chances mainly, but very much in control of the game. Burton had their only kind of other good chance of the game, bar the goalmouth scramble at 3-0, which I still couldn't quite, even from the highlights, see for certain whether it was a Boateng block or a Hazard. Well, it was a Hazard save, but I don't know whether it was a Boateng block as well as a Hazard save to maybe take a bit of sting out of it. But either way, Hazard tips it away, and then the fourth goal comes with real cherry on the cake from Arabusa to Parim Peppel. I think I've said that right. I'm not sure if I have.
He's called Bim Peppel, I think, is the nickname.
Well, that'll do, I suppose. That was, again, Mumba in his best left wing back role. I want to talk about him later, Joseph, put a bookmark in that. But again, picks up a ball, puts the ball across, and Bim, as we'll more safely go for. Obviously, it's in the position to slot it home with a poacher's finish. And then we could have had a fifth after that. And I think it's Ibrahim slides through Finn. I think it's Ibrahim who slides through Finn. 1-on-1. Saved by the keeper. No, it's Wiredu, actually. Wiredu who slides through Finn, and then goes back out. Wiredu battles again, gets it to Patterson in the same phase of play, who unleashes a fierce cross from the edge of the box, which again the keeper tips wide. So really excellent performance, deserved win. It wasn't one of those where 4-0 flattered Argyle. Anyway, you see a lot of 4-0s that are really basically like 2-0 games that a team's just a bit hot on the finishing. But that wasn't one of those at all. That was a fully deserved 4-0. It was an absolute rout. Maybe you could argue Burton could have got one, but Argyle certainly deserved their 4 without a shadow of a doubt. That was the move to 3-5-2. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that is something that I think really paid absolute dividends. It sort of gave us the, we are more suited to 3 at the back in the defensive protection it provides us, but it managed to almost combine the best of both worlds and give us the defensive solidity of 3 at the back with the control of the midfield that you get from obviously from next to a third man in midfield and another striker. Obviously, when you put it like that, it's like, you kind of wonder, well, hang on a minute, why doesn't every team play 3-5-2? And I think the reason they don't is it provides so much impetus on the wing backs because there's only 2 wide players. Naturally, it's a trade-off. If you want to have 3 centre backs, 3 central midfielders, and 2 strikers, the trade-off is that you could only have 2 wide players rather than 4 wide players. So the emphasis is on those wide players to have a great game. Ballymumba had an absolutely phenomenal game, bordering a 10 out of 10. I think he was probably my man of the match, despite Tolai getting 2 goals. So maybe a couple of slightly loose passes brings him down to a 9. And Sorinola had a not so fantastic, but nonetheless very, very impressive game. And that was the reason why we won so convincingly. Very, very happy about all of it. Over to Joe.
I was going to say, I was forgetting a podcast was breaking out halfway through that, Sam. Thorough as ever. Before I come to you, Gab, for your take on things, I do have to, it would be remiss of me not to talk about the Norfolkian, who has donated £2 via a super chat on YouTube, says, hello again, that's for you, Sam. And there's a little follow-up to that as well, Sam. Can you say hi to Jack, Kersey and Barker from the Norfolkian? So next time you are in their company, which I assume international call-ups permitting will be away to Mansfield in a fortnight. If you could pass that on, that would be very good. Gab, you were at the game yesterday. Obviously, it was a much shorter trip for you to get to the Pirelli Stadium or whatever it's called than it is for any of us lot. The questions coming from you from Ollie, who needs to be on his best behaviour tonight after the message I received last night. Question for you from him: where do you think the strengths and weaknesses lie in our squad? Not watching us that often, what's the obvious and underlying info that you can give us?
Well, I suppose I did think, as much as I think I spoke to Chris Cooper after the game, who said that was one of the best away performances he's seen in recent years, and I kind of agreed with Chris on three-quarters of that game. I would say for the first 20 minutes, some would say it was an even game, maybe less generously. I think Burton were possibly on top at that point, and I can certainly remember one or two moments where Argyle were really pinned back into their defensive third and almost struggled to get out of their penalty area on one or two moments. So I just want to kind of, not taking anything away, but just, there was that little bit that I think, oof. So it does make me wonder that, and I'd love to sort of put this to the panel, against better quality opposition, and I say this, you're having beaten Luton 3-2 recently, maybe a bit more of an experience balance. That's probably the thing that I'll be looking for in the next couple of windows, one or two older heads who have got that bit of know-how, perhaps.
Dan, I think that's been set up perfectly for you from our messages in the group chat. Do you think it can be sustained at the moment against the better quality teams?
We've had two very different types of away wins over the last couple of weeks. The Luton, and both of which were equally brilliant. You can argue which one was better or worse or whatever, as two of these panelists were doing yesterday. But they were equally brilliant in very, very different ways. Luton, we had to fight and scrap and just put our bodies on the line for the whole 90 minutes, really, and take our chances when they came. Yesterday was just an example of dominating a poorer opposition, which is what we need to do on a more consistent basis if we want to be near the top of the table. But it is also reassuring for those that are worrying about relegation, which I am not completely worry-free of at this stage, given our kind of lack of depth in some areas. That's what we needed to do, and we did fantastically well. We had a really, really shaky first 15 minutes, as Sam said, and I think it was one of those. It reminded me of the Barnsley game in reverse a little bit, and some other games in years gone by, where the home team are kind of up for it. They dominate possession, they dominate kind of aerial duels. They've got all the territory, they're creating chances, and we can't get any meaningful possession. And you just felt if we ride this wave out, and then kind of calm down, get on the ball, and start playing as we can, we'll be fine. And that's exactly what happened. Burton were well on top, I'd say, for the first 15 minutes, to be honest, but we rode it out. And after that, they basically didn't have a chance, and we created loads. As Sam said, it wasn't just a kind of taking our chances when we can. We absolutely dominated and could have, maybe not should have, but could have scored more than 4 on another day. So, yeah, like I say, we've had the kind of fighting and scrapping win. We've had the completely dominate the opposition away from home type win. But in between those, we had the game against Peterborough, where for most of the game, they sat in that low block and we couldn't break them down, and they took their chance when it came. So it will be interesting to see whether this system, this style, these players against that kind of low block, frustrating game, more likely to happen at home, to be honest, will be able to get results. As someone put in the comments, it's infuriatingly inconsistent at the moment. 4 wins, 5 defeats. 4 wins, 6 defeats, I think, isn't it? And we need to find a bit more consistency if we want to mount a playoff challenge. Do I think that's possible with the squad as it is at the minute? I'd love to say yes. I'm not sure. I certainly think that with this system does suit some players really, really well. However, our squad is still lacking depth in some areas. And if we get a few more injuries to key players, we're going to be back in trouble, unfortunately. But yesterday, in isolation, fantastic win, played really, really well, and more positive signs, that's for sure.
John, I don't want to sort of kick them while they're down, because Burton are obviously going through a very tough start to the season and their fixture list hasn't been kind, although nor is ours. Did 4-0 flatter them yesterday?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say I don't really get the jubilation particularly. I think this is probably the darkest moment in this club's history since Accrington away in 2019, maybe since administration. and I don't think a 4-0 win can really paper over the cracks. We're in big trouble, and this is a really depressing moment to be an Argyle fan. And all I could think about yesterday on the way home.
Just to fill Gab in very quickly, this is a little running joke because everything that goes wrong from Sam is an apocalyptic moment in the football club's history. Just 7 days ago, there was a complete meltdown after a 1-0 defeat against Peterborough. We did literally everything but score. This is what it's in reference to.
Okay.
I don't know why you're saying that. I was very depressed all the way home on the train. Couldn't stop crying. Anyway, did it flatter them? No, I think Sam was right when he said maybe they could have got 1 goal and we deserved about 4. I think the XG, as much as I think that's kind of a limited stat at times, was I think 4-1 to us. They did create a couple of good opportunities. The one early on from the knockdown that Hazard then sort of shovels against the post, and then we sort of scrap it clear. On a different day, that could have been very much like Ibrahim's goal at Luton. It could have hit one of their players and flown into the net. We obviously got a little bit lucky there. And then in the second half, they had the one where they put a good ball into the box and Hazard has made a really good save. So I don't necessarily think 4-0 flattered Burton, but I also don't think it flattered us. I think that scoreline or thereabouts was deserved. Have said I thought they were very poor, and actually Dan alluded to this debate that we were having. I actually personally think that we played better at Luton because obviously 3-2 is a lot narrower of a scoreline, but at Luton, we also did not concede a goal from open play. We conceded 2 penalties. I think you could have an argument, as we did at the time, about whether both of those were correct decisions. I think certainly one of them was, and that clearly reflects badly on us to give the referee a decision to make twice. But, from open play, our defending that day was absolutely superb. We defended our box brilliantly. Yeah, got a little bit of luck, obviously, in the way the winner went in, but we played with 10 men. We actually had to sort of show real fight and heart and character against a team who, I think have probably flattered to deceive a little bit so far this season, but I would have a hard time thinking won't be sort of vaguely up there towards the top end of the table in one form or another come the end of the season. Whereas, the sort of first quarter of the game, as has been mentioned aside, I felt we didn't really have to get out of second gear yesterday. I mean, that second half was about as comfortable a performance as I can remember us having, certainly away from home, although after watching us win away from home 4 times in the last 2 years, it's not something I have hugely got used to yet. But no, that third goal I thought was a really crucial moment. Just a quick aside on that, I absolutely love it when strikers have that kind of scoring instinct that they sort of just scuff it into the net every single time, even if they don't necessarily get a clean touch on it. Sort of a real striker's goal from Talai, who seems to be the sort of player who's going to score quite a lot of those. And from that moment on, in particular, it was just utter domination against a team who, I thought were very poor. I think Gary Bowyer's a good coach. I think he's done a good job there overall. And I think you could see the sort of patterns of play that he was trying to, that they were trying to play at times, but they just looked really vulnerable. I mean, the goals we scored were all far too easy, carved them apart time and again. Sort of performance that we've seen, as Argyle fans over the years, back in the sort of genuine dark days when we actually were struggling. You start a game brightly, but then heads go down as soon as the first goal goes in, and the sort of spine of the team just folds. And they're a team that I expected to be down there this season, and obviously they are down there. I think they've got a couple of games in hand on some of the teams around them, so it's not a lost cause by any means, but they're going to have to improve a lot if they're going to have any hope of staying in this league, particularly obviously as well, given that the 4 relegation places is such a brutal reality if you are a team that is sort of struggling or doesn't necessarily have the best players. So yeah, I have a hard time seeing them escaping that. But obviously I think Burton have done that before, right? That they were pretty much written off a couple of years ago and then improved a lot. So don't want to sort of totally write them off just yet, but certainly on that evidence, I think they're gonna have a very hard time staying in the division. And to Dan's point, and this is sort of the serious point, Gab, to my earlier joke, is I thought the relegation concerns were pretty preposterous the entire time, or at least exceedingly premature. And I think yesterday showed the real golfing class between a team that is likely to go down or be there or thereabouts, and a team that's going to be probably nowhere near it.
But just on that, John, do you think, because I can remember after the first maybe 5 games in, there were a lot of fans who at that point raised serious concerns and were quite quick to look upstairs for some of the issues that you had faced in the first few games. And so I'm just wondering, to what extent, are there criticisms to be levelled at the club as a structural entity, and to what extent is there a case to sort of just go and accept, what, we are a side in transition, we have lost, most of our squad, we've had an era of managerial instability after a long period that had brought the opposite of that, and we actually just need to sit back and let these young players grow, and there might be a bit of inconsistency that we'll have to take with that.
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest, to use a cliche. Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I was not one of the fans who was concerned about relegation 4 games in. Sure. I wasn't totally ruling out the prospect, but it just felt to me way too early. And even though we were poor in those games, I don't want to sort of sugarcoat how we played. Certainly, Bolton away and Leyton Orient at home, pretty poor. We played 4 teams that I think are pretty good, or at least, tough games. Not a lot really went in our favour in terms of, refereeing decisions, just sort of moments in game. I mean, that Barnsley game on opening day was ridiculous in terms of, the referee's loss of control, and could have been a completely different scoreline on another day, even though we didn't play brilliantly. And I also, I think I was much more forgiving about the possibility that a team with a young manager stuffed with really young players had potential and room for improvement. I think a lot of the judgments after 4 games were extremely static. It was, this is as good as they're going to get. Certain players written off by certain people on this podcast, maybe on the bottom left-hand corner, who have gone on to put in several excellent performances so far. So, I was a bit more bullish about our possibility for improvement, and I feel like I've seen that. It's not perfect. We've had now 4 wins in 6 since we signed Talai. Obviously, you can say that's an arbitrary window, but I think that was a pretty significant turning point. And our form since then is 2 points a game. Now the defeats in that time were at home to the bottom team in the league at the time, and a 4-0 loss at Cardiff. Neither of those is really an acceptable result. I think there is going to be rough with the smooth going forward. And I think, and this has been something Dan's been very strong on, there is definitely still a case to be made that being in the conversation for, will we make the playoffs or not, isn't acceptable. There is a school of thought that is, we came down as a well-run club, ostensibly, and our goal should have been build a squad that can get promoted straight back up at the first time of asking. And so I think, even if we finish 6th and don't go up in the playoffs, there will be some who will say, well, this season was ultimately a failure. I think that basically there are questions to be asked about strategic decisions that have been made. I think the window was not as bad as some think, but I think it was mixed, certainly, and there are some acquisitions we've made that don't look as good as others. I guess I was more in the school of thought of like, we could just sign a team that will piss the league because we're going to have a relatively big budget, and I can now understand why we haven't done that. I mean, I personally think that if you sign the likes of Alfie May on a 4-year contract at the age of 32 or whatever he is that Huddersfield have done, if that doesn't work for you, you've got a lot of players on big contracts, and Blackpool, don't want to write them off because it's still very early, but what happens if Blackpool don't go up this season? I mean, they're going to have a squad of players who look very good for the level, who are on long contracts, who don't necessarily have resale value or room for improvement. So I sort of understand the general approach we've taken.
They're 22nd. Never mind, don't go up. They're 22nd.
Yeah, but unlike you, Sam, I don't think the season ends after 10 games. And I remember a little club called Leyton Orient who got to the playoff final last year after being bottom at this time or close to it. So, things can improve, and I suspect they'll probably get rid of Bruce, and we'll see what happens, who they appoint. But yeah, I think there's definitely questions to be asked, and I think it's definitely reasonable to argue that we shouldn't be, in 15th position in the league, no matter how we've done it. I think I'm a bit more forgiving of, now we've gone down this road, I'm just sort of looking for improvement, and I think I'm seeing that. I think Cleverley has shown growth. Since those first few games. It was not his fault. I don't think it was perceived as being his fault that we were so poor in those games, but he also wasn't seen as being, totally immune from criticism. If you lose your first 4 games in charge of a club, there's going to be some questions to answer, regardless of the sort of context of that. And I think he has shown he's, more adaptable than maybe some of us feared he might be. So, and individual players look like they're improving too. So, yeah, I think there's a bit more room for optimism. There's definitely still, very legitimate questions for the upstairs people to answer. Obviously, we've just lost our CEO as well. Don't know if you've been following that, but
Andrew Parkinson.
Yeah, so there is a lot of turnover going on, and I certainly don't want for 1 minute to say that I think everything is totally rosy. I also did think that the doom mongering after 4 games was a bit much, though, and hopefully I feel like I'm being vindicated on that. But obviously, a long way to go.
Sam, just want to come back to Gab's point, because Jack doesn't feel like we really got to it yet. When it comes around to January, Now, when we bear in mind that Xavier Amici, Caleb Watts, Julio Pleguezuelo are all due back in and around the end of December, early January, the likelihood of us doing major business in the January transfer window is pretty slim. Do you think if we do anything in January, it is to add one or two more wise heads when you think about the impact? I know Alex Mitchell isn't the oldest person in the world, but the experience he's brought to the back line, and you'd like to think Jamie Patterson's going to have an impact if we keep him fit. And obviously, since Joe Edwards has come back into the team, we noticed an immediate difference, even if his legs aren't quite there. Sam, do you think that's an area that we need to look at in January?
No, to be honest. I think if we do business in January, if it's looking very much like we're not in danger of going down and also not likely to make the playoffs, which I think very much down the way it is probably looking, it looks like a mid-table season all over it.
Sam, just quickly, there's not going to be a world in which we don't think we can get in the playoffs in January if we are mid-table, because the margins are not, the margins are tight. I don't think there's going to be a world in which they've written that off unless we are in the bottom four or more in that conversation. Like I don't think there's going to be a world where they just write the season off in Jan one way or another, personally.
I don't know necessarily write the season off, but I think if it's looking like a bit of a punt, if it's looking like a bit of a speculative option, what they'll do is they'll sign young players who can develop as part of this young team with the view of next season being a real promotion push. Is how I think we'll go. And I think we'll sign players who can go into it and can be part of a big team next season rather than sort of short-term experience, win now kind of players. Is how I can just go into business. I do think experience is needed, but like we said, Cornell Suits should be back by then. Pleggy should be back by then. Obviously, Connor Hazard, Joe Edwards. Obviously, Edwards got one more game of his ban left, and Hazard now has just come back in. So I'm not ruling out that we might have one or two experienced players, but I think very much the priority is going to be sign players who are going to develop as part of this young team. Because look, and someone who has been on the more pessimistic side of the kind of meta narrative of the season than you have been, where I will say that where I am getting slight excitement is that this is a young team with very high upside. And I think that if this team develops well and if they all reach their full potential, we could, maybe in 6 months or 12 months time, have a very, very good League One team on our hands. Obviously, that's the more positive end of that scenario. So I think, if anything, in January, we'll be signing young players with resale value who are going to be a big part of next season's team rather than players who we think are going to be a speculative punt on getting us into the playoffs, in my view.
I suppose the point I would kind of push back on that a little bit with Sam, and that's, having been really impressed with Argyle in so many ways from what I saw at Burton, but I look at the title winning squad of the 22-23 side that got to 101 points, and you look at Joe Edwards. I think Joe Edwards now is probably slightly different to Joe Edwards 3 years ago. I think it's fair to say. I would look at Matt Butcher, Jordan Houghton, even someone like Gillespie, James Wilson. These are all players that are either peak-aged or more on the more experienced end of the spectrum. And I think that it's really exciting that the club's invested in these young players. But I just think that maybe, and I don't know whether it's going to happen this season, but certainly for next season, if it isn't this year, I think to find that consistency, I think the club in the next 2 windows is going to need to add, even if it's only a couple. I know you've got the likes of Sooks and Pleggy to come back, but I would just go for 1 or 2 more, I think.
Well, you could also, onto that list, add James Wilson, Danny Mayer as well, even Dan Scarr, who's kind of PK. So you are right, but I would say 2 things. One is that there is more than one way to skin a cat, and the other is that the other I would say is that what Joe asked me for wasn't such what I think we should do. It's more kind of what I think the club will do, because Simon Hallett has been so very big on this resale philosophy, long-sightedness, and I think what he will do, obviously not that it's him making the decisions personally, but he hires people to run the club in line with his philosophy. So I think when I say what he will do, I mean that in a kind of more general sense. What the club will do is very much signed in line with that philosophy. Now, again, I'm not saying this is an absolute firm prediction. I'm not saying that they're not going to sign anybody who's above the age of 25. I'm sure they'll sign one or two of those PK players, and maybe even a older head experience there. I mean, that was what they did with Jamie Patterson after all. But I don't think that's going to be primarily in the mould in which we're recruiting, is my prediction on the matter.
Let's go round the group then. Next usual talking point on match day is one player each, good or bad. I suspect it's going to be a significantly lot more good than bad. Who wants first dibs on one of the 11? You can have a player off the bench as well if you like, but free for all. Who wants to talk? You want who? Sorry, Sam?
Barley Mumba.
You want Mumba? Why don't you kick off with Barley Mumba then? Because that's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think well, it's kind of maybe a bit of an elaboration on my opening gambit, in that I think that what in the 3-5-2 is most important is the wing backs, because even in a 3-4-3, you kind of have the wide forwards. So you kind of have those 4 wide players in that sense, and you only have obviously 1 centre forward and 2 CMs rather than 3. Whereas in a 3-5-2, because you're prioritising the players in the middle of the park, 3 centre backs, 3 CMs and 2 strikers, naturally, as I sort of said earlier, the trade-off of that is the wide players. So what does that mean? It means the emphasis on the wide players is more important in a 3-5-2 than in any other formation. And obviously, Sorinola certainly had a good game. I'm not disputing that, but the one who had a really exceptional game was Barley Mumba. He was involved in so much. He was involved in the first goal, putting it down to Boateng, ping it across. He was involved in the 4th goal. He directly got the assist for Peppel. He was involved in the one of the big chances. I think it was the Tolai chance that got tipped away by the keeper in the first half as well. It was him that I think put the ball in for that, or certainly made the pass before the ball. One of the two, I think it was him that put the ball in for that. So he was involved in 2 goals and 1 other big chance, and just generally speaking, winning territory. We controlled that game largely because of Ballymumba's ability to carry the ball up the pitch. And I think now Argyle fans have almost got into a bit of a goldfish mentality on Mumba, in the sense that when he plays anywhere other than his best position, we forget how good he is when he is in his best position. He's I'm not saying he's never had any good games in another position, the left wing back, but he is to some extent a bit of a all or nothing player. If you play him in his best position, he is probably the best or one of the best players in League One, and even a pretty good player for the Championship. If you play him anywhere other than that, it can be maddeningly inconsistent. If you play him as a defender, you get his ability to carry the ball up the pitch, but you maybe suffer from his defensive lapses. If you play him as a wide attacking player, like a wide forward in a 3-4-3, or a attacking wide player in a 4-2-3-1, you lose his best attribute, which is his ability to progress the ball and to win territory, because he's already in a more advanced player on the advanced position on the pitch. And even if you play him at right wing back, that's maybe better in one sense, that he is a wing back, and that is the perfect role for him. But even then, you lose his cutting inside onto his right foot, because he's already on the right hand side. He's not going to cut inside onto his right. So left wing back, absolutely categorically the best position for him. And whenever he plays there, he never really has a bad game at left wing back. I thought he was absolutely exceptional yesterday. And I think even in a game where Tolai got 2 goals, Mumba was still narrowly, but was still my choice for man of the match. And long may it continue playing with his best position. I honestly, genuinely think that, I know Tom Cleverley prefers 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 in general. I think I myself, as a rule, might probably the best Argyle I've ever been in recent years since that half season in the first half of the Championship playing 4-3-3. I certainly am not unsympathetic to the idea that elite teams play 4-3-3 more than they play 3 at the back. But we have to think a bit pragmatically. When we've got a player who is absolutely far too good for this level, but only when played in a certain position, we've got to just bite the bullet and play him in that position. You've got to, like Tom Cleverley himself said, he's had to learn to adapt. Good management is about getting the best out of your best players. Barley Mumba is our best player, I think, when fully fit, or maybe level with Tolai, and when played in his best position. But if you don't play him there, you're basically reducing him from our best player to, maybe one of our middling players. And that's just sort of shooting yourself in the foot, in my view, not to play him there. So, and I think that's one of the things that makes 3-5-2 better than 3-4-3. Because when we had that run of games playing 3-4-3, we played Mumba in the wide forward role. So it was tantalisingly close. We were playing with a left wing back, but we weren't playing him as the left wing back. And now we have finally done that. He put in his best game of the season by an absolute country mile. And I think if we are going to have any hope of going around to the playoffs, I still don't think it's likely. I still think it's got mid-table all over it. He will be one of the pivotal players in that. He had an absolutely superb game, like a day. Not perfect, couple of slightly loose passes, maybe held onto the ball a bit too long a couple of times, but overall exemplary performance off and on the ball. He was pivotal. And you're on mute.
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks. Dan, I just need to check. Richard Sloman wants to make sure you've not developed laryngitis or anything. Why don't you take the next one? Who do you want to talk about from yesterday's performance?
Apologies, I'm going to slightly cheat and take two players, but it's the partnership. It's the partnership, and I saw someone put in the comms just a couple of minutes ago about the threat of having two up front versus one. As Sam says, I think it's horses for courses, and if you have a one up front system with either a striker that can really cover the pitch across running in behind or hold the ball up for runners to go beyond him, I think one up front is extremely effective, as it has shown for us in the last 3 years when we've pretty much exclusively, or ever since Ryan Lowe left, played one up front and been very successful for some of that. However,
Schumacher did keep the 3-5-2 until the end of the 21-22 season, but yeah, certainly since that summer of 22, yes.
Yeah, very much so. And as Gab put it, our most successful season in living memory, we played one up front for basically all of that season. So I wouldn't say as a blanket rule, we always have to play two up front. However, for our options that we have and the way that I think it suits certain players' strengths, as Sam said with Mumba, having a strike partnership of Tulai and Aseni, especially in games like yesterday, when there's going to be space to run in behind. We're not just going to be up against a low block. There will be opportunity for Oseni to use his pace and just not to discredit him too much, but just run around a lot. But actually, what he did do yesterday very well was make good runs into that right channel consistently. So Sorinola, or I think it was Ibrahim quite often as well, would just ping balls in behind their fullback, and it looked kind of a bit rugby, a bit hopeful, but it gave Aseni something to run onto and gain us territory. He could then pick the ball up from there, and then we build, often knocking it back to Sorinola to put cross in, or just gaining us a throw in or something like that for some territory. The other thing which that benefits those runs off the ball is creating space for Tulai, and Tulai is an absolute animal. I don't think he almost doesn't need space. He's so good at kind of holding off defenders and holding the ball up and bringing our midfield into play. But if you've got a striker running off him and creating even more space for him, I think that could be absolutely lethal. A partnership that I likened it to is going back about 10 years is the Ruben Reid-Luis Alessandra partnership, where you've got the striker that does a lot of running off the ball. And then to complement that, you've got the absolute battering ram who can also score plenty. And they complement each other well. Early days for Aseni, and I was pretty critical of him at the start of the season. I still don't think him playing, if we go back to one up front, I don't think it will work. I don't think he's good enough at holding the ball up or holding off defenders. But
well, can I just come in on that, Dan? Because I also think Aseni possibly drops a little bit deeper than Tulai. I always felt Tulai was the one on the last defender kind of thing, and I felt Aseni was slightly more withdrawn or drifting slightly wide, so he plays a bit more off the cuff. So I don't know if I'd even think of him as an out-and-out striker.
Yeah, very much so. And if we do go back to 4-2-3-1 at some point, I said this at the start of the season, I'd see Aseni as a right winger, to be honest. Obviously very direct and not really a kind of stand out wide and put crosses in. He'd want to get involved centrally, but at the same time, he is more of a wide player in that system. So, yeah, it's early days. It's one game. It's a game which suited Aseni's ability to run in behind and gain us some territory from there. But it's good signs in that respect. And if we can continue to exploit that, then I think that could be very good. Like I say, when we come up against a low block, it could be a very different matter. Talai will still be effective, I think, because his aerial ability, his strength, his all-round play. He is absolutely mustard, and I'm very glad we've got him in for the whole season at least. But will Aseni be as effective against a low block? Possibly not. That's when you look at perhaps Peppel as an option. Good for him to get a goal yesterday. I think it's really good. Jamie Patterson's fit again and got some minutes yesterday. That's certainly another option, probably the fourth option to play up front as well. Maybe even Tegan Finn just playing slightly off the front man as well.
By the way, Tegan Finn was brilliant off the bench, wasn't he? He nutmegged 2 people in his own half and went on this lovely carry, didn't he? So he looks like a really exciting prospect.
Yeah, kid's got bags of potential, and again, that kind of slight versatility which you don't always have. For players as young as him, is good. 3-5-2 probably wouldn't be perfect for him, but like I say, maybe play him just off the front man or go 3-4-1-2, play him in the hole. So we've got some options there. But like I say, bigger picture, I still really worry if Talai gets injured. He's pivotal to us this season, whether we play 1 or 2 up front. And it was really, really good from Aseni yesterday, but I haven't seen as much of him so far this season. Likewise, Peppel, but I really hope they can bring that more often on a more consistent basis if we want to succeed this season.
In response to Mandy T's YouTube comment, am I watching the golf? Yes, I am, and I'm loving these long-winded answers from everyone. Normally, I moan at Sam's monologues, but they're great because I can just keep focused on things. Up the Europe. Gab, why don't you go next? I get a sense I know which area of the field you're going to pick. Why don't you talk about somebody who caught your eye yesterday?
I would probably go for Bradley Ibrahim because I don't know if anyone saw, there was a moment in the first half where, probably towards the end of the half, where Bradley Ibrahim was on the ball just in front of Burton's penalty area, and he'd used his trickery to such a strong effect that none of the Burton Albion defenders wanted to go near him. So it was almost a comical situation where it was like he was playing by his own rules. And one thing I'd actually like to bring up about Tom Cleverley, because I spoke to Simon and Zach before the game, and one of the things one of them said was Tom's the hardest working coach or manager that we've come across. He's always first in the building and last out, which I think is really exciting. But one thing, just to come back to the Bradley Ibrahim thing, is I think Cleverley allows him that freedom to express his individuality, because I think there's some coaches that would want their players to move the ball quickly and not one player to dwell on the ball. But actually, Tom Cleverley allows Bradley Ibrahim that freedom to show what he can do. And he brought bags of trickery, and I thought he was sensational to watch. John, you've got a nice smile on your face there.
I think.
No, I'm an enjoyer of the first one in, last one out, the cliche. But in his case, it is actually true by all accounts.
Okay, right.
I guess the biggest frustration for us all, Gab, is that due to the most ridiculously soft yellow card decision yesterday by the referee, it means we're without Bradley Ibrahim now for Wigan Athletic at home on Saturday. But obviously that comes up later in the show. John, who did you want to pick out from yesterday's performance?
Well, we sort of roved all over the pitch, and obviously yesterday was really a day for the front players, and I just did want to give a quick shout out to Aseni as well, because I think got some stick at the beginning of the season, or maybe some skepticism as to whether he was good enough to be a serious option in this team in the short term. I think there's a real player in there, and he's I think proved some people wrong. And I think someone in the comments said you can't really coach the eye for goal that he seems to have, and I would agree with that. He seems like someone who's really capable of poaching in the box. But the player I was actually going to focus on was at the other end of the pitch, and that would be my man of the match from yesterday, Matthias Ross. I think he is a huge reason for our recent upturn in form. Obviously, it started before he came in the building, so he's not the only reason, but he has been so impressive since he came in. I think he is very visibly too good for League One, and for us, obviously, when we signed him, we knew he was someone who had a lot of pedigree coming in from Galatasaray, still a young player, obviously hadn't actually played for Galatasaray very much, had some sort of relatively eye-catching loans at European clubs, and if the rumor mill was to be believed, he had offers from a few championship clubs, but decided to come here instead to play in the first team more regularly. And I'm very glad that he did, because he won absolutely everything yesterday. I felt like he sort of looked like he was playing the game on easy mode at times. There was one moment in particular where I think he sort of mopped the ball up and then just like turned away from one of their players. Just a really, really classy moment. Again, dominant in the air. And I thought it was interesting as well that he played in the middle of the back three, because I think in his other performances, it's been Mitchell in the middle of the back three. Mitchell is about the most archetypical centre back in a three you could possibly imagine, in the sense that he sort of gets his head on it and mops up. And maybe Ross is someone you'd associate with having that more sort of technical side to his game, who could play, on either side. But no, they played Ross in the middle of the back three, and I think that's a testament to how dominant they can be, and indeed was yesterday. And by the way, Mitchell, I would just say, I think he gets a bit of stick for not being the best player on the ball, particularly watching the highlights back this morning. He did a couple of really nice passes forward. I think it was him who played in Talai actually for the one-on-one, where Talai sort of forced himself a bit wide and then had the shot that was blocked behind. That was a lovely ball over the top. The shot that he had.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was the same. Not sure if it was the same chance
It wouldn't be a Sam run for if I didn't get one case of mistaken identity with it. So fair enough.
Actually, for once, wasn't having a dig at you there. I was not sure if you were talking about the same chance.
I know you were. Just genuinely checking.
No, I think it was Mitchell's ball, and then there was the shot that he had from the from a set piece, which was a volley on the sort of pivot, which just went over the top. Yeah, really nice. So yeah, I thought those two. It was nice to see the sort of inversion of what you would expect their roles to be. Ross being the sort of the harder man at the back, who sort of makes sure everything gets mopped up, and Mitchell being the one who plays forward a bit more. But it really worked. Again, Burton were not a strong opposition, so we'll have to wait and see if that is the way around that it continues to be. But I was interested to see it, and and I thought despite Talai's brace and the sort of overall positive impacts of the forward players, Ross would have been, for me, the man of the match yesterday. I thought he was fairly flawless.
Yeah, I think it's one of those nice occasions that we haven't had too many of this year, where we can look through each one of the 11 and we could probably sit here and find so much that we can be positive about in their performance. I think Law McCabe absolutely is showing his potential and class on the ball at times.
He will play many Premier League games. I'm calling that. It's going to be a very early shout.
Yeah.
I think he's got the highest, obviously I'm not saying he's the best in this squad now, but because of how good he is with his age, he's got the highest upside of where he can get to with anyone in this squad. I think he'll play Premier League, and honestly, I'm going to go with it. It's an early shout, not just a few Premier League. I think he'll be a Premier League regular for quite a long period of time. He's already absolutely brilliant. He fulfills an absolutely pivotal role in this team, in that which I think a lot of people just don't quite appreciate, in that he allows the base to control the game from midfield. That was such a big problem in the first few games of the season. Even the Stockport and Luton games, they were battling, yes. They were great wins, and I'm not even going to say they were undeserved. Certainly in the case of the Stockport game, but what they were not was controlled. And what Law McCabe brings in absolute space is that control of the midfield, the ability to just pick up the ball, play a little passing triangle, find somebody in space. 9 times out of 10, he puts the right weighting on the pass. Naturally, there's always going to be a mistake. Gets himself in the right positions, reads the game in front of him. I was so impressed by him. And I think often players like him, who just allow that platform to control the game, go so under the radar, because they're not the HCM who gets, 10 assists and 5 goals a season. They're not the, crunching defensive midfielder who wins headers, win tackles, but they are the player who have such an impact in the control. The comment come up on the screen saying we need to play Finn instead of McCabe. I'm certainly not against playing more of Tegan Finn, but they're very different players. Tegan Finn's a very talented, skillful attacking. He's a number 10, or he's a wide forward. He's certainly not a deep line number 6 DM. So I'm certainly not against playing more of Tegan Finn to that comment, but I wouldn't frame it as playing him instead of McCabe at all. Very different player. Yeah,
going back to my point, that there's a load of performances you can pick out of it yesterday. I absolutely think Owen Hosseini is worthy of praise, as is Matty Sorinola as well, possibly his best game for a little while in a green shirt as well. But I think one comment that came through was from Reese, and it's sort of right that I get to take this one really, and that's, can we show some love for Boateng yesterday, who was quality. I am more than happy on this live stream to go on record, having gone down to Truro City in pre-season and watched Malachi Boateng in midfield and completely wrote off his Argyle career on the basis of that performance. I said, this guy has no future at the club. He's not going to be good enough. The slice of humble pie I've eaten this weekend is quite sizable. This guy has got to be the first name, one of the first names on the team sheet every week now. He's been absolutely superb for this good run of form we're on. It's been instrumental down to his dominance in midfield alongside Bradley Ibrahim. They were ably supported yesterday by Law McCabe. There was that rather rash moment when he got in down the left-hand side and completely shanked his cross out for a goal kick, when he looked like the most uncomfortable person inside the stadium yesterday. But the difference he's made in the midfield this campaign has been superb. I go back to the Stockport game when him and Ibrahim just completely ran the show. Every time Stockport got that near the halfway line, they would just win the ball back, and their first movement would be to turn 180 and just run back at Stockport. I think everything that's good about Argyle at the moment is coming through Malachi Boateng. I agree with what John said actually yesterday. Some of Alex Mitchell's passes in the first half in particular were just sublime. There was one that he teased over the top for Talai, and he sort of ducked under it and got in the wrong shape and couldn't quite get his toe on the end of it to poke at home in the first half. The question generally is to the four of you, before we let Gab go and enjoy the rest of his Sunday evening, is just how excited. I know we're only 15th. It's only a win against Burton Albion. You know, last week was the apocalypse after a 1-0 defeat against Peterborough. How excited should we be about the ceiling for this young group? Because it seems to me at the moment, every week is an evolution. Peterborough,
evolution.
In my opinion, I wasn't on last week. I wasn't able to give my opinion. In my opinion, we did everything but score last week. I thought for large parts of the game, it was one-way traffic. I thought we were excellent without scoring. I know Sam definitely disagrees with that. But there's been a lot of good performances now over a period of time. How excited should we be? And just where is the potential ceiling of this group in the next few months?
I'll take this one first because I've probably been, or maybe level with Dan, the most negative about our prospects. Likely the Stockport and Luton wins. They were great, enjoyable. I didn't actually go to Stockport, but they were great, enjoyable days. They were very enjoyable, but they didn't give me a lot of faith that we wouldn't be at the bottom end of the table. That absolutely did give me every faith that we're not going to be at the bottom end of the table. It's only one game. We are maybe dependent on a couple of players staying fit. But yeah, that level of control, level of sheer dominance we showed, level of ability to carve teams open and create chances made me think this isn't a mirage. Maybe I am sleeping on how good this team has the potential to be. Far more so than after the, very enjoyable Luton win did, and more so than the Stockport win did as well. That was the game that has genuinely swayed me to thinking, actually, you know what, we might be half decent. I'm still not going to say we're absolutely, totally out of the woods. This isn't me covering my angles. I have changed my position substantially. If Talai were to get injured, that would be a scenario we very much want to avoid. But I am now, to avoid any accusation of bet hedging, going to say I am now confident we will stay up, like fairly to very confident we will stay up. I still don't really think the playoffs are likely. I just still think there's not quite enough depth in the squad for that. It's still a young squad, learning squad, inconsistent squad with a young, learning, inconsistent manager as well. But all of the above being said, yes, yesterday was a game changer for me. Yesterday was a game that even after the calm reflection on Sunday morning has made me fairly considerably change my view in a way that the other wins have not done. It was by far and away the best performance, best win of the Cleverley era. And I'm very, very pleased about it. And yeah, I think, obviously the absolute best case scenario is you fly into the playoffs and win the playoffs. The best, I suppose, realistic case scenario, in as much as that's not an oxymoron, is that we continue to develop, continue to come together nicely, make it into the top half, and then this young budding team really reaches the next level next season and he's right in the heart of the promotion race. And just for the first time, that started to feel possible. And I'm very, very happy. And then the final point, I think as much as I did moan at the hierarchy of the club about the summer recruitment, and I certainly don't retract all of that, what I will say is there are transfer windows that look good at the time and don't look so good in hindsight. I think January 2023 was one of those. I think even certainly summer 2024 was one of those. But there are also transfer windows that look bad at the time and look better in hindsight. And maybe, just maybe, summer 2025 will be one of those. I think the late summer business has redeemed the window. Matthias Ross, I think, early days has the potential to be one of the best centre-backs in the league. I think Law McCabe has the potential to be one of the best centre midfielders in the league. And I think Lauren Talai is possibly one of the best strikers in the league. It is early days, and maybe I'm going too far the other way to an extent. But what I always say is I change my mind when the evidence changes. And the evidence says that in the final weeks of the window, we've added 3 absolutely quality players, and we've reverted to a system that's going to get more out of Ballymumba. So, yeah, sorry, comment coming up from our beloved host, Aaron, saying any chance of letting Dan, John, or Gab speak. Sam, I will wrap up now and say that, yes, not completely done a full 180, but I've substantially changed my view for the first time now. And if we do lose to Wigan, I want you to all remind me I've said that. And so I'll hand back to Gab. I know he's going now. And Gab, all I'll say is, as I said to you up there, I hope that after the Argyle cheered you up after the early kickoff in the Birmingham game. I know you must have needed to do that result, but I hope the Green Army gave you a lift.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and all credit to you, because it's fantastic sport. One of the best away followings that I've come across in terms of following the EFL. So you should all be really proud of yourselves for that. But yeah, I think there's some exciting building blocks. I think some bigger questions definitely to be answered. But I do see an identity about this team. I like how quickly it moves the ball and creates chances. So I think that as a starting point, I think is really exciting. So hopefully there's some, after a tricky couple of years, I would say, hopefully there's another positive period around the corner for the club.
Gab, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on this evening. This is how you do it, by the way, after Argyle gets a win, working on each other's shows, because I can't wait for our next heavy defeat before I end up appearing.
I'll be looking at the results when Argyle lost, and I'll get Joe on.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Gab. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Brilliant work from Gab with the EFL debate. We're back as a 4. Is there anything else from the Burton game you lads want to talk about before we move it swiftly on?
Well, you didn't let me and Dan answer the question as to how
if you have
excited
strong
we are.
views, if you have strong views on it, feel free, because there are some very important putts coming up that I'd like to zone out to. So
I'll just say I'm ready to put my neck on the line and say I think this team will be in playoff contention at the end of the season. Now, what I don't know is, will that be 8th, 9th, 10th, sort of, 6 points off it with 4 games to go level of contention, which is still technically contention, even if you're not favoured? Or is it going to be we're sort of 4th or 5th in a couple of months' time and try and stay there? What I've seen in the last few weeks is enormous improvement in the playing personnel, as well as the style. And frankly, what I've seen is a league that I don't think is all that, to be honest. I don't think this is like the Championship where it's totally unforgiving. Every week you have to die to get 3 points, to quote a great man. Yesterday we played in second gear and we won the game 4-0. Now, not everyone's going to be as poor as Burton, but also not everyone is going to be as good as some of the teams that we played early on, either Cardiff, for example. The other thing that's important to me is I think what you're seeing is a team that, it's not linear progress, but it very much at the moment looks like 2 steps forward, 1 back, which is much better than 1 step forward, 1 back, or 1 step forward, 2 back, obviously. And that if that sort of forward momentum can be sustained, there's no reason we can't, pretty quickly find ourselves in contention. The actual points differentials are really not that significant. Yeah, okay, more of the season is gone than maybe we would think, given it's still early, but it is still very early. And I think that, again, Leyton Orient showed last year after an absolutely abysmal start to the season, not necessarily having the best squad on paper, they got to the playoff final. I don't think that's by any means impossible. I don't think that's the sort of thing that we should be talking ourselves out of just because we had a slow start. To me, since the squad was a bit more settled and had those end of window additions. And since, you know, some of these players are starting to gel with each other, because again, you know, it's a team of strangers. Joe's making a face, probably at some tedious golf thing, so I'll leave him to that. I guess I was less surprised than others that a team of completely new players who are all young with a new manager in a new division took time to find their feet. I actually thought that there was a world in which I would have to be telling people not to panic going into November or December with us in 20th, which could still be the case, and not ruling that out entirely. But you know, I was always pretty confident there would be some gelling that would go on and there would be some improvement. I would say that's happened quicker than even I anticipated it. I did not predict that we would beat Luton and Stockport or get three wins out of 4 this month. I said 2 wins out of 4, and I think that was probably one of the more optimistic assessments in the group, shall we say, when we all put our predictions in at the beginning of the month. So I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't be aiming for that. And I don't think it's going to be a pistol league type season, but I think we're going to be looking way more up than down.
Some
and it's in response to the
life.
question, sorry, Pilgrim Macca says we couldn't beat the low block against Peterborough. Sure, yeah, I don't think we're going to win every week. What I would say against Peterborough is we beat the low block twice in the sense of a header that looped off the bar and it very nearly bounced over the line, probably within a whisker of going in. And one of the keepers made one of the best saves I've ever seen. You know, I understand that doesn't count as a chance because it was so well executed by Talai. But it's not like we created nothing. And yeah, there's going to be off days. Yesterday we played against a team who didn't play a low block, but it was the type of game where if they had scored one of their early chances, I could have seen them sitting in and frustrating us. But we got the first goal, and after that it was very easy. So yeah, again, we're not going to win every week. If we were to win every week, we'd obviously, even from this starting point, I'm sure we'd win the league. I don't think that's what we're going to do, and there'll be steps back. But this team looks like it's taking more steps forward than back at the moment, and that is impressive to me because it would have been very easy after 4 defeats on the bounce to throw in the towel or completely lose confidence. That doesn't seem to be what's happening here, and yeah, that makes me quite excited.
Before we go on to the Wigan preview and any questions, I feel Dan should answer that question for 2 reasons. 1, because I don't want him to break the record of least words said on the podcast for each of the panelists. And 2, because George is coming home to cook his tea, so I need to move up to my room. So I'm going to turn my camera on.
There's always, you know, he wasn't even being nice there, Dan, to give you an opportunity. There was an ulterior motive that he wanted you to come in there and speak.
There's also definitely been times that Adam Price has said fewer words than this.
Absolutely. Let's hope Sam's not left some fish in the oven. Dan Allard, what's your thoughts on the general state of things as we stand?
Well, I want to know what George Wood's cooking now. I mean, I feel like I'm missing out on something. Young players are going to be inconsistent. They're more inconsistent than experienced players. That's pretty much a rule of thumb. And for that reason, I think that it is unlikely that this season we get into the top 6, to be honest, unless we absolutely go for it in January. However, as John said, the differential between scraping into the top 6 and going down can sometimes be as little as like 15, 20 points at the end of the season. It's not colossal. So I wouldn't rule it out for sure. I would say that, yeah, yesterday's one game, you can say you're only as good as your last game. The feeling is very positive right now. However, a weird quirk of our last 2 relegation seasons is that in both of them, we've won a game by 4 goals in both of those. We've had a couple of 5-1 wins as well. So you can't just look at this one result and say we're definitely not going down from it, because it happens. But in terms of the ceiling of these players, there's absolutely potential. You know, some of these players that are in and around our first team and still far short of what you'd kind of call peak potential age, is very much so that you know they could massively improve. But the thing with young players again is that a few of them make it. Quite a lot of them kind of make it, and even more of them don't make it. And I'm not saying that, you know, I'm writing our players off or saying they definitely won't make it. They have got a lot of potential. They need to realise that potential. And in the short term, that probably means that we are going to have a lot of really inconsistent performances. So I hope that doesn't cost us in terms of getting dragged into a relegation battle again. Like I say, yesterday was fantastic, but I'm not going to write off the idea that with a few injuries to key players, we're not going to get dragged back into trouble. We are not clear of that battle yet, for sure. But yeah, the signs are upwards, and certainly if those key players do stay fit, as John said, I think Talai coming in, given his quality as a number 9 and our main centre forward, getting 2 points per game since he's come in is certainly a positive stat that we can look towards and go, well, if we carry that on, maybe the playoffs are possible. So, yeah, wouldn't rule anything out at this stage. Certainly feel more comfortable, as John said. We're clearly, if we finish below Burton, I'd be astounded. So there's one of the 4 teams we can not worry about. We just got to keep going, and I suppose accepting the inconsistency of these young players. It's frustrating. I've made my feelings very clear about, where I feel like we should be this season. Stoked by the top 6 budget comments and Simon saying, we're going for promotion, etc., etc. Had he come out and said, look, this is the plan, we're going to, invest in a team that in a few years' time will reap the benefits from, I'd have been more accepting of a mid-table season. I'm going to really struggle to be accepting of it, given those comments at the start of the season. But if, as John said, there are real signs that, we could really mount a challenge next season, I'll be more understanding of it for sure. And yeah, the other thing I suppose is around the kind of Argyle way and kind of club ethos of signing young players. I hope that we do it smartly and we kind of continue to do it, because we've just jumped around from different ideas, maybe kind of forced by circumstance. But in January it was just kind of sign a load of kind of just sign these players that will try and keep us in the division, suit long ball style. In summer 2024 it was try and raise the profile of the club. Simon denies that, but obviously the managerial appointment dictated that. And yeah, I hope that this is the sign that we will actually have an ethos and a style that we will try and build over a number of years. So there's reasons for positivity to be for sure. And hopefully we can just kind of carry on building. There's going to be inconsistencies. There's going to be losses. I think it will be a mid-table season, if I'm honest. But given how I felt a couple of weeks ago, I'm quite glad to be feeling that in a way.
Fair play, Dan. Over 1,000 of you are watching. If you have just joined the stream, you will see a little QR code.
That's funny, because you're not. Over 1,000 people watching and you're not one of them.
You can see a little QR code to the right-hand side of your screen. If you're able to scan that and vote for us for the best club content creator in the Football League, where the host pays unlimited attention to his episodes, do go on to the Football Content Awards website and vote for us in that award. If you're unable to scan the QR code, all you have to do is visit argylelife, and you are able to find the link to vote for us there. So, if all 1,000 of you do it, we'll be that little bit closer to winning the award. Moving on very quickly before we do go on to the Wigan Athletic preview at the weekend, it would be absolutely remiss of us not to mention the Argyle women have gone and topped their group in the FA Women's National League Cup after victory this afternoon against Bristol Rovers. They have been absolutely superb through the group phase and will now tackle the knockout stages. And what a start to the year that Marie Hurahan's team are having. Absolutely fantastic. There've been some great crowds inside Home Park as well, and I think they're home again either next week or the week after, so it'd be good to see another large crowd there at Home Park to get behind the girls, because there is a real wave of momentum behind that team at the moment. And what success could be, who knows what the ceiling is for the Argyle women's team. Of course, if they get promotion this year, they'll be in the Championship, which is just one tier below the Super League. Who knows, we may progress in the women's equivalent of the FA Cup and get one of those big sides down to Home Park. What a fantastic moment that would be for everybody's hard work in promoting the women's game, which grows exponentially. An hour and 10 minutes in, we should probably tackle the Wigan game next, because we've got a whole load of questions coming your way tonight, lads. Everyone's been very responsive in the comments tonight with questions, which has been great. Ryan Lowe is in town on Saturday afternoon coming up. He brings his Latics down to Home Park on what's sure to be another interesting afternoon. There's been plenty of good games between the two clubs in recent years. Plenty of interesting moments involving Zoo Corner in the last game that Wigan played down here when there was a crowd in. Anyway, what sort of game are we expecting here, Sam? Obviously, we are without Bradley Ibrahim, who will be suspended for this one. Joe Edwards remains suspended. Tom Cleverley remains suspended. What do you hope to see, other than a win?
Completely forgotten about all that business with the Wigan fans in the last time they came in. That's a real throwback, isn't it? Blimey, almost feels quite surreal that happened now, doesn't it? That incident notwithstanding, my thoughts on the game. Well, I think it'll be great if we can finally get some kind of result against Ryan Lowe. We actually don't have we have a 0% record against Lowe and Schumacher whenever we faced them with their respective new clubs. Lowe beat us, did the double over us in Preston in the 23-24 season. Schumacher beat us with Stoke in 23-24, beat us with Stoke at the start of 24-25, and also beat us with Bolton at the start of obviously this season, 25-26. So we're currently 0 points from 5 games against our former Scouse managers. And if anyone else appoints Wayne Rooney, I'm sure we'll change that. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, it would be very nice to break that duck.
Ian Foster erasure here from Sam.
Well, that's not even worth thinking about, even in jest. Yeah, we are like 0 points from possible 15 against a former Scouts manager. So it'd be nice to get at least a draw, if not a win, to break that duck. What I will say is, as much as we are obviously going to be without Bradley Ibrahim, Wigan are also going to be depleted. I think Christian Sadie is serving the final game of a 3-match ban. Morgan Fox got a red card yesterday, so he's going to be absent, and you'd assume we would have negotiated the clause that they cannot play Callum Wright against his parent club. So they're going to be without 3 of their starting players. So it's going to be maybe a somewhat depleted Wigan Athletic side. They're not in the best of form at the minute. They're coming off 2 quite convincing defeats in a row. So we talked last season quite a lot about good times and bad times to play teams. This is, I think, quite a good time to play Wigan, and I really hope we capitalise on it and make it count. I do think this is as good a time as we're going to get probably to play Wigan Athletic. We know Ryan Lowe, real confidence manager with Argyle and with Preston. They're not, Ryan Lowe's never really been a manager who's, win 1, draw 1, lose 1, win 1, lose 1, win 1, draw 1, lose 1. It's never really been like that. He has really good runs and really bad runs. And I think we might be seeing Wigan in the midst of a Ryan Lowe bad run, which would be very good timing for us if so. And I really hope we can go ahead and capitalise on that with a win. They're without a lot of their regular starting players. So I think that's a very realistic possibility that we can do so. In terms of the question about Ibrahim being suspended, who do we bring in? I think there are a few options. I suppose the most obvious recognised CM at the club is Waidu. But obviously he's now very clearly seen as more of a defender. And I don't think we want to mess up the back line. Certainly after Waidu had probably his best day for his best game for the club in the win yesterday for sure. Another option is Caleb Roberts. I think has had mixed success when he started. He's had some good performances. He's had some which maybe looked a little bit out of his depth. But I do think with Caleb Roberts, I'm not sure in this role of the 2-8s in Boateng and Ibrahim pushing forward. Not really sure that's him. I think he'd maybe be a more natural player if Lord McCabe were injured or suspended. So I'm not sure about that. So I suppose I'm not really sure of those 2 options. So I suppose actually there's one other more sort of orthodox CM option, which is Belarus, which I think is actually his best position. Not that we've seen him there yet. Or maybe the 3-5-2 becomes more of a 3-4-1-2 with somebody in the number 10 hole behind Oseni and Tolai, which that somebody would probably be more likely Jamie Patterson, possibly Tegan Finn. So I'd run through 5 options there, which is, characteristically long-winded of me. I think the one he will go for is the Jamie Patterson option. I think with it being a home game, I think that will, like I say, Bradley Ibrahim. It was a 3-5-2, but it was quite a fluid 3-5-2. Ibrahim got forward so often, even though he wasn't officially in the hole, he was almost playing in the hole at times. So I don't think it would be that much of a dramatic shift to put Patterson in there. And I think that against, like I say, a team who are in a bit of bad nick at the minute, a little bit depleted, little bit, lacking in confidence on a bad run, we can maybe just sacrifice a little bit of that midfield controls for the sake of it, a little bit more in the way of attacking overloads, and Patterson in the hole behind Oseni and Tolai is probably what I'd go for. That notwithstanding, wouldn't shock me to see Belarus in the midfield 3. Mute again.
Bloody hell. In answer to Jack's comment about how's the demolition job going on the USA, currently the building is ready to fall, but we're trying to knock it down with a marshmallow at the moment rather than a wrecking ball. Dan Ellard, Sam rattled through 5 potential options to replace Bradley Ibrahim. What would be your preferred choice?
None of them. I wouldn't. System-wise, I agree with the 3-4-1-2. I think we can afford to be more aggressive at home to Wigan, who very dangerous thing to say, but haven't won an away game yet this season. They've only got 2 points from their 5 games so far. So we've heard that one before. But so I think we can be more aggressive. But I play Tegan Finn in the hole.
That was one of the 5.
Oh, I thought you just said Jamie Patterson. My apologies.
I said Patterson or Tegan Finn as the number 10.
Oh,
so
right. Okay.
He was still one of the 5 options. It's not the one I eventually opted for. But
that pays me for.
Yeah.
No, that pays me for not listening and for looking at the Ryder Cup scores on my phone. Very professional that I am. I think with all notwithstanding all the things that we've said about having more experience in the team, I think the potential that Tegan Finn's got. I know Sam said about Lorne McCabe and his potential. I think Finn at such a young age has clearly got it, and is, whilst he's again going to be very inconsistent, I think on his good days is already good enough for this level, and therefore we just need to play him as much as possible. Not every single week, but have him starting games on a reasonably regular basis is what I'd say. Like I say, 3-5-2 ain't perfect for him. That's why it's changed the midfield shape ever so slightly. I don't think we necessarily need that kind of sit in front of the back 3 type midfielder at home to Wigan. I think that would work pretty well, and have that hopefully a bit of a creative spark that we were perhaps lacking in being able to break down Peterborough as often as we would have liked. So reasonably optimistic on it. Like I say, you almost worry when a team hasn't won away from home all season and then rock up to Home Park. We've all read that script before. But I think we can get on the front foot against them and hopefully get a positive result. Whilst there will be no Callum Wright in the Wigan Athletic squad, they have got a couple of players who donned the green shirt in the past in Will Aimson and Stephen Sessignon, who remembers. We'll see if they start on Saturday.
Yeah, you know what, Dan, you made a great argument for it being Finn. Honestly, I think it's a coin toss between the 2. I just think that as much as I'm certainly not against starting more of Tegan Finn, I just think that when Jamie Patterson is fit, which is very rare, he also could be an absolutely very high-end player for this level. And I think given he's almost always injured, we should make the most of a rare game where he might actually be fit and have Tegan Finn come off the bench.
I am starting to have kittens about this golf. John, why don't you take my mind off it, and why don't you give us the first score prediction and your thoughts on who should replace Bradley Ibrahim?
I completely missed that because my internet collapsed. But it sounded like you were debating Finn or Patterson. I certainly think it
Finn, Patterson, Belarus, Roberts, or Weirdo with a 5 options.
Right, but it sounded like you narrowed it down to Finn or Patterson. I certainly think it should be one of those two. I think we should take the opportunity to get more on the front foot and play someone who's more of an attacking replacement for Ibrahim than someone who's going to sit a bit deeper. Could see a case for either, but I think I'm just about side with Sam and say that Patterson to start, with Finn to come off the bench after an hour or so and have a good half an hour of running them ragged when we are hopefully in the lead. Yeah, I'm a little bit in two minds prediction wise. I could see this being a frustrating one where we are going to draw a game at some point, right? And I could see this being one where we sort of dominate the game but can't quite see it over the line. That being said, though, I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic and predict a 2-0 win. Confidence flowing after today, and yeah, I think Sam's right that it's a pretty good time to play Wigan as they go. So not with 100% confidence in this prediction, but I'll back us.
Sam?
2-0 to the Greens.
Dan?
Oh, I can't be the only one to not predict a win. I'll mix it up wildly and say we'll win 2-1.
Yeah, I'm going to join you with 2-1. I think I can't see us keeping back-to-back clean sheets. That would be very dangerous territory for everyone's expectations. Oh, for heaven's sake!
Right. So all four of us have predicted a win, and we're playing at home to a team that hasn't won away from home all season. I wonder what could happen here.
I almost just feel it's so similar to the Peterborough game in that sense that lightning can't strike twice in the same place. I know it obviously can strike twice in the same place, but I don't know. I don't think it will. Maybe I'm being getting too carried away and going too far. But obviously, I'm not saying there's no possibility of it happening. Like I say, Ryan Lowe is literally got a 100% record against us as a manager up to now. Obviously, there's a chance he has the better of us again, but I don't know. I just think sometimes a game is going to go the way you'd expect it to. And I think this will be that, yeah. And as John said, there is obviously the very overlooked possibility that we are surely due a draw. So maybe it'll be one of those kind of like frustrating 1-1 games in which we're the better team, edge it, or maybe even fully dominate it and just can't quite get it done. That wouldn't shock me, but I don't know. I mean, we're on a good run. They're on a bad run. We're at home. I'm not going to overthink it. I think we're going to win.
Superintendent says, I've never seen anyone so interested in golf. I can promise you I am aging horrifically in the last hour and 22 minutes.
It worse than Paul Heckingbottom's Preston did at Home Park last season.
Should we rattle through some questions so I can go and watch the end of this? Because I'm going to need to sit. I'm going to have to sit behind a sofa, I think. Phil Bayliss, first of all, congratulates both me and Sam on the excellent interview with Chris Errington. If you haven't seen our latest My Argyle Life, head over to YouTube and catch it. It's a fantastic interview, if I do say so myself. Countless memories of working with the late, great, forever missed Gordon Sparks. Some fantastic stories in there about that and his time at Argyle, and some very interesting press conference moments as well. Chris was very generous with his time, so do catch that if you can. P321man1 asks, is Talai John as good a striker that we've had since Ebanks Blake? I do hope Nana Sandra isn't watching at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit apples and oranges since Ebanks Blake was in the Championship and Talai is in League One, although I sort of see where the question is coming from because they're quite similar players, maybe you could argue, like sort of quite stocky strikers who are physical and good at holding the ball up, but also kind of poachers. So yeah, I can see the comparison. I mean, I wouldn't say personally he's as good as two of the strikers who we had at the back end of last season yet. Ryan Hardy and Mustafa Bundu, I think, are both better players than Talai, but Talai's time on his side, I think he certainly for this level looks really excellent. And I think Talai, he was playing in the National League 2 seasons ago in League 2 last year. So he's taken to League 1 like a duck to water. Not only with us, but I think in the first few games with Vale as well, he definitely scored at least one goal for them in the early part of the season before joining us. So yeah, I think he looks like a really, really exciting prospect. I guess I'm not going to get too carried away just on the basis that we have had strikers who have done it a level up. But yeah, pretty good start to his Argyle career, and hopefully much more improvement to come. But he's certainly someone who's going to play at a higher level, with whether that's with us or not. Once he develops a bit more.
For anyone else who's got half an eye on the Ryder Cup, it's going to be incredibly funny when Europe do eventually get to the points required. After watching some of these American celebrations, the bloody morons. Dan, coming your way next. Richard Sloman asks, do you think the younger players particularly are a bit nervous and feel under pressure at home park? We are a demanding crowd and there have been some boos from day one at home.
I'm sure it's a factor, and certainly the pretty hostile atmosphere, which probably peaked in that Leyton Orient game, can help for players. And it's called home advantage for a reason. The Ryder Cup being a perfect example where, you get the home fans on side and it can be a real force. As we've seen with our home form over the last couple of years, the home park crowd can be a real positive wave, which players can feed off. The frustrating thing is that, no matter how much managers and owners and coaches try and build it up, it is always a case of fans will react to what they're seeing on the pitch. They can try and, say about, fans try and G us up and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's reactionary to what they are seeing on the pitch. And what they saw on the pitch in the first month of the season was so far from good enough. So, I think that's another factor as to why things really might improve, is that, confidence builds and we're a bit more understanding, and we're just in games more often with the additional quality that we've brought in. So, yeah, it's definitely a factor, and certainly one where those experienced heads sprinkled throughout the team are really important, just to kind of, keep things tight. A very interesting factor is that we haven't got a point from going behind yet this season. Every time we've gone behind, we have lost. And that will be another big milestone to overcome, is if we do go behind, and even if we do get a point from it, that will be another really character building moment in respect of that. My eyes are drawn to the comment from Pilgrim Macca saying about Talai being taken from us in January. Won't happen. The 2-club rule, meaning he already played for Port Vale this season, can't play for a third club. So unless Port Vale sign him back again in January, he ain't going anywhere. I believe I'm right in saying that, Sam?
Entirely correct. Obviously, we may lose him in the summer, but we've certainly got him for the season.
Yeah. So we've got him until at least the summer if he stays fit, which is great. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see how the fans and the players react to if we go behind against Wigan, say off the back of a really good away win. It probably largely depends, like I say, on how we're playing. If it comes against the run of play and we're really knocking at the door, I think the fans will stay pretty positive. The players can feed off that. But if we are having one of those days like we did in the first 4 games of the season in particular, where we are just not at the races at all, that will be where you might see some kind of, fan frustration, and the players might get down, and it will be a tougher afternoon. So we'll have to wait and see.
Sam, what's your views on having a goalkeeper as captain?
I mean, we won the game, so it can't have done that much.
Just a very quick one, doesn't need a massive answer. Were you a little bit surprised Hazard was given the armband?
I was a little, yeah, but that wasn't really because he was a goalkeeper, more because it was his first game back in the team. And I just kind of generally think that you maybe want your captain to be somebody who's got that strong existing rapport. But then again, the counterpoint of that is that Hazard is kind of, with our incredibly high churn, now one of our elder statesmen of the squad. He's now one of the longest serving players. So when you look at it from that point of view, I guess that kind of makes sense. I think the idea of having a goalkeeper as a captain being a problem is quite old fashioned, really. I generally subscribe to the view that leaders on the pitch will always be leaders on the pitch, whether you give them an armband or you don't. And really, if anything, the captaincy can be a useful tool to make players into leaders, to give it to players who aren't natural leaders and step up. Like Curtis Nelson was probably quite a good example of that. Conor Hurricane was a very good example of that, when both of those two were given the armband. So I guess from that point of view, I kind of would have given it to Malachy Boateng, just because I think he's somebody who's growing into a talker on the pitch. But hey, we won 4-0 and thoroughly dominated the game, and Hazard himself made 2 crucial saves, so it certainly didn't harm his own performance either. So certainly, I don't think you can argue with the results.
Very quickly, one word answer. Don't need to elaborate on reasons. From Aaron, what do we make of the Hardy versus Talai comparisons? Which one would you pick if you could only have one?
Hardy.
Can I? I'm really only allowed to say one word because they're such different players. But I am very, very excited at the thought. Sandra, can you tell me about this? If this is maybe happening in January, please. Hardy and Talai up front, and we are taking this league by storm. If you put a gun to my head and make me pick one, yeah, it's Hardy. Just.
If we can have Hardy and Talai in a front two, then I think we will absolutely then I think we'll make the top two if we can have Hardy and Talai in a strike partnership.
That would be very difficult though, Sam, because we'd have to obviously get above the greatest manager in the Football League and his Bolton side. So it'd be incredibly difficult to stop. It would be incredibly difficult to stop their juggernaut. They got beat again this weekend. John, final question for you from Aaron. Would you take a 5% chance of death if it meant finishing in the playoffs?
No.
There we go.
But going up a mountain in Austria, different story.
Sandra's replied with a very cryptic thumbs up. Champagne flutes smashing together, 2 green hearts and a red one. So I can only presume that means 2/3 of his heart are green rather than the red of Wrexham. So
that's it, Sandra. I'm taking that as a yes. Hype train.
Yeah, that's it. We look forward to the Welcome Home Ryan Hardy live stream in January. Lads, I've got nothing else because I'm about to absolutely cack it watching this golf. Does anybody have anything else they want to talk about?
I hope Europe win now. I'm invested in it for you, Joe. I mean, I'm invested in how much you're invested. It looks like we're...
I'll be brutally honest with you, Sam. It's not looking as good as what it did before they all started hissing golf balls a few hours ago.
Bloody morons. Am I right?
They are bloody morons. Yeah. You're right.
Am I right? Europe only need to win one more game.
No, they still need to win 2 games, and at the moment they're only leading one of them. So it's flipped around, but there we go. Gents, that's everything, I believe. We'll see you all next week.
Good.
Have a good week, folks. See you all after.